Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special episode of Unplugged with Taylor. Today, we are here with Taylor Perkins, also known as the Cult Daddy. Taylor, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to chat with you. I love your content.
Oh, yeah, I'm stoked to be here. I appreciate you reaching out.
Yeah. Let's dive in. Let's start with your story. You have an incredible story. I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah. So, man, I'm trying to think where to start. So, I was born, and my religious background is I was born into Mormonism, or like the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And my mom is a very, very spiritual woman. And so, the life that I grew up around was not kind of spiritual, but everything was centered on like spirituality and like our faith in God. And everything else was kind of like a byproduct, like it wasn't school first, it was God first. And
Mhm.
so I've always been a very like spiritual person as well. Though I guess the knowledge and kind of the perspective that I had at that time was very specific to what I was born into. And so I always had these kind of like big dreams because, Mormonism is centered on Jesus Christ. And, I had these dreams of like, I'm going to do these great things in the world to show Jesus just how much I love him, just how much I
Mhm.
appreciate his sacrifice. Um, and in the Mormon church, when boys turn, at that time it was 19, you have the option, but it's like, it's an option, but it's kind of required where you can opt to serve a mission. And so basically, you write to the leadership of the church. You say, "I would like to serve a mission," and they just send you to a random part in the world. You have to learn a language, and for 2 years, you do that. And so, my older brother, he went to Philadelphia. I had a younger brother who went to Taiwan. My sister went to Canada, and I ended up being called to go to Ukraine. And so from 19 to 21, I spent those 2 years learning Russian, living in Ukraine, talking with the people, hanging out, teaching them about, Jesus Christ and the church. And it was a really kind of like formative experience. Most 19-year-old boys are like out partying in college, like hanging out, right? Um, and here I am living with a dude wearing a suit and tie every single day, like knocking on doors, asking if people wanted to learn about Jesus Christ. And it was like, it was probably one of the mentally, the toughest things I've ever done in my life
I can
because,
imagine.
yeah, you just have no prior knowledge, they just send you and you're like, I've got to learn Russian. But the cool thing is, it really shows you just how quickly your brain and your mind can adapt to situations. Because
Did it feel safe? They sent you alone?
no, so they have like a structure where in Ukraine they had about 100 boys that were there, and then they have a mission president. Um, but it'll be two guys in like major cities, and so there's people that get like beat up all the time, and you don't have like immediate, like so they try to make it as safe as possible, but it really depends on like where you go in the world and like
Damn.
how, yeah. So it was, yeah, it was pretty crazy. But I just think the craziest thing, I still remember like flying to Ukraine, not speaking Russian, and just feeling like I was in a cartoon, feeling like like everything in my world had like shifted. But it was crazy because within 3 months I was conversational in Russian. Within I think it took me 6 months to become fluent. But you just get immersed in this new culture, and it really shows you kind of like the power that your brain has to adapt in like a survival situation. Um, and so that was a very kind of like formative, you spend 2 years teaching kind of these principles for this church. Like obviously it's going to like strengthen your resilience within that faith, I guess you could say. And so I came back from my mission, went to school, ended up meeting my wife. Like there's a very big focus um, on the family within the Mormon church, and like finding, they call them eternal companions. They believe that whoever you marry, you're sealed to for time and eternity. And so it's like this big, from being a young kid, like I looked forward to the day of like meeting my wife. Like it was like the most exciting thing, where it's like, oh, when am I going to find my partner? And so I ended up meeting my wife in college. It's been an incredible marriage. We've got 4 beautiful kids. And from there, I was like, all right, how do I use my time and my talents, to spread the word about Jesus Christ? And I've always been like, I think I have like a pretty magnetic and like charismatic personality that a lot of people are kind of like drawn to. And so I've always been in these leadership positions and different things. My jobs after school, I always had like a ton of success. I went into sales, had a lot of success there. And a lot of people don't know this, but in like 2016 and 17, I was one of the like really early kind of anonymous crypto influencers on Twitter, where I found this thing called cryptocurrency, which started way back in like 2011. So I wasn't super early, but I was pretty early. And so I was talking about those things online. I built up a following. I had a ton of success. And by the time I was in my late 20s, my wife and I, we retired. We had made a couple $1,000,000. Like we were like, life is set. We're doing it. And I've always been this like super optimistic person. And everything always had worked out for me, and I was just like, this is just the way that life is. You have a good attitude, you work hard, good things happen. And so while I was, we moved to Puerto Rico because we wanted to let the kids have a cool experience. It was like right after COVID. And I was sitting on the beach one day and I was like, you know what? The reason why I've been able to do all of these things has nothing to just do with my intelligence or my work ethic. It has everything to do with the opportunities that I had, the mentors that I had, access to information. And so I was like, that's what I'm going to bring to the world, is I'm going to build a tool that will help anybody with a cell phone find, because like on Twitter and these other social medias, the way the algorithms work is they just care about whatever gets the most views. And that doesn't mean the best content. And I saw this as a content creator. There were people who would put out quality content and they would get less views than people who would put out spammy or FOMO enticing content. And so I was like, okay, let's build this new financial engine where basically we take in over 100 data points about every content creator. What are they talking about? How does that perform? Like who follows them? What is their trustworthiness? And basically it will create this score. So, if you've never invested before, Taylor, the idea was you could go onto our app and immediately have data to point you to the best people that could help you with your goals, right? And so it was a really worthy idea. We went out, we raised a couple $1,000,000. We started building this app and everything was incredible. It was going so well. The people that we were like bringing on to the company and advisors, like it was just people I had no business talking to, people that had built $1 billion companies and, done these incredible things. And so I just had it in my head where I was like, this is what I'm bringing to the world, and I'm going to bring this financial literacy because financial struggles is the number one cause for divorce. It's the number one cause of depression. It's the number one cause of suicide. I'm like, this is a major issue. And if we can teach people and help them become more financially literate, you're going to solve a lot of, issues. And I'm like, and this is what I'm going to do for Jesus. And then basically a year and a half into the company, everything just went south. Like everything started falling apart. There were issues. There were things where I felt like there was a little bit of whether on purpose or negligence, I'll just say like there was some like dishonesty where it really like blew up the company and there was nothing that I could do about it. And in every situation I have ever been in, it's always come down to like the more effort I put into this, the better job I do. I can control the outcome. And I couldn't.
Mm.
And it was crazy because it just sent me to the darkest place I've ever been in where because I'm like, oh my gosh, some of the money that we raised came from friends and family, people who I sincerely care about, who trusted me. And, um, I just felt like I failed them. And it was really tough. Like I got to this mental space where, the hardest part of the day was like waking up, and like just realizing that I was like still alive and had to deal with these issues. Like it was
Mhm.
really tough. And I started having these like super like suicidal thoughts where it's like you've failed your wife because in trying to recover things, I essentially took our financial situation and threw it into what I was trying to do. And and it was just like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to start over. I've financially ruined my family. Like I've failed my children, my wife, like they would be better off without me. And I've never been in that mental space before, like it was just something where it just wasn't a part of me. And what ended up happening was for years, I had been listening to various podcasts where they would mention like ayahuasca, and I've always like looked into the science behind psilocybin and ayahuasca and the effectiveness at helping people with like chronic depression or with major addictions. And so it got so bad, but I had this fear around it because growing up super Christian, I'm like, this is the devil. This is like evil spirits, like this is messing with darkness. And things got so bad where I was just like, I have to do something because I don't know how I'm going to pull myself out of this hole. And so I went and I told my wife, where I was like, I think I want to go do ayahuasca. And she was like, yeah, you need to. Like she was immediately, just because she had seen such a big change in me where I just wasn't the person that she married, where I was just on autopilot and like a shell of a human being from the stress and just I felt like I took every opportunity I could to kind of like pull away from the situation. And so obviously she's noticing it. And so I started doing some research and it just worked out perfectly where there was a group that was like, hey, we have a retreat this week. It's not too far from you. We had someone cancel. So if you want their spot, you can take it.
Well, she called
And
you.
yes, 100%, 100%, and anybody that's done ayahuasca knows that it's like Mama Aya calls you, like when you'll feel that pull. Um, and so, yeah, I did it and it changed everything. It was crazy.
Can we
Yeah.
talk about that experience? I think that I'm so intrigued in having conversations about experiences with plant medicine. I've had several with psilocybin this year, and I've found that, like, in trying to describe it in spaces where people have never had an experience with it, it's almost difficult to like put into words
Yeah.
some things. But I would love to just hear whatever you'd like to share about what that
Cool.
experience was like.
Yeah, totally. Um, oh man, I'm trying to think if I should like talk about the experience first or kind of how I think it works. Okay, I'll go with how I think it works. So like a big thing that I talk about online is how computers are truly a reflection of what I call the human computer. Like a computer, just like we have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind, it's like a computer has a conscious mind and a subconscious. It has these deeper levels of memory that dictate action and like quick recall and these different things. And what I believe psychedelics do is I believe, sometimes your computer is super buggy when its short-term memory, the GPU, the RAM is clogged. You know, you have 1,000 tabs open. So the computer's like, we need to remember all this because they might click on it and we need to have it preloaded. Or you have all these different programs running at the same time. And so the computer gets really overloaded and it starts acting buggy. It starts getting slow. It starts overheating. And I think, you know, the best thing you can do for your computer is to clear space, clear the memory, refresh, close some programming, and then it gets back down to its base level. And I think what these plant medicines and psychedelics do is, I believe, it clears the space and it clears the vessel. It clears kind of this some of your short-term programming, and it allows you to kind of like exit the chaos and then also look at yourself, look at the buggy programming, look at where you are from a non-judgmental perspective, just a very kind of like analytical. And then it's up to you to keep working on your computer, you know? And the one thing I will say, I do think there's like a lot of people out there who I'm actually going to be doing like a series on this because plant medicine is so incredible, but it can also be abused because when you clear your vessel, you are completely exposed to all energies. And that's why, you know, with ayahuasca, often it's done with a shaman who knows how to work with energy and create a protective space for you.
Mm.
Because, you know, I do believe that there are energies out there. I don't think it's like necessarily evil in the sense that they want to damn your soul to hell forever, but I do think there's energies that like to mess with you and don't care if it hurts you. And so I think that's where some people, if they take it recreationally, they can have a really, really bad experience that lasts with them for a long time. And it's not necessarily the mushrooms or it's not the medicine that's causing that bad experience. It's the fact that your vessel is completely open and you're exposed to whatever energy is coming in. And so that's always the warning that I put out there, especially for people who just like to use it recreationally, because it is kind of like playing with fire. Because there's no like, once something's coming in, there's no stopping it. But so my experience, I went into it and it was like, you know, they have a dieta before you go, kind of like a specific diet to prepare. And, you know, I took it very serious where it was like, you know, you don't eat like seasoned foods. Like they cut so many things out of your diet. And I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need to do it right. And then I show up there, you know, and everybody kind of has like that plant medicine feel, like the clothes they're wearing, these different things. And to me, it was really weird because I'm like, oh, this feels culty, you know, or what I've been told. Yeah, it was one of those things where, you know, I showed up and just because it was so different than what I was taught
Yeah.
spirituality and religion should look like, it was a little bit weird for me. And so, you know, I did everything that that they had us do. There was like a lot of meditation and different things like that. There was a combo ceremony where basically they burn 3 holes into your skin and then they take like, I guess it's the poison from the poison frog and they put it on your skin and it like cleanses your body.
Wow.
And that was like really cool. But my like face swelled up like a frog. Like it was pretty wild.
Did that scare you a little bit?
You know, no, I'm a very adventurous person. Like
Okay, I was
I'm
gonna say
definitely
you got
like,
to be pretty
yeah,
adventurous for all of this.
yeah, totally. Yeah,
My
because I
understanding,
should,
what were you gonna say?
oh, I was just going to say, I should state like growing up super religious, I have never done drugs, alcohol,
Mm,
any substance. And so this was my like, you know, it's pretty crazy to be like, yeah, my first time with anything was ayahuasca.
that's really
Like,
crazy.
yeah, yeah. And so I just remember that night, you know, the shaman um, was like, everybody, you know, you're going to take your first cup and we'd invite you to take the second cup when we come around so that you have at least two. And, you know, I took my cup and I just like said this prayer where I was like, okay, God, like Jesus,
Mm,
if this is messing with like darkness or evil things, it's like I need you to protect me, but I hope you can see that I am hopeless right now and I just need something to change, you know? And so I took it and I laid down, and like 20 minutes go by and they bring the second cup and I take it and I lay down. And um, the thing that you always hear about ayahuasca is when it's starting to kick in, people start purging, whether it's kind of like throwing up or out the other end. And that's actually why I did combo, because I was like, oh, I want to get my purging out of the way so that like my experience doesn't have to do with that. But like nothing came on. I didn't hear anybody throwing up next to me or anything. And so it felt like I was laying there forever. And I was like, this didn't work. I'm like, this is a scam. Like, I just spent this money and like, it's a bad batch, you know, or something. um, and so when I was thinking that, it was funny because the shaman came back over and was like, hey, like the energy feels like you need to take more. And I'm like, 100% I need to take more, you know? And so I took 2 more cups and laid down. Nothing happened. And so I went up to the shaman again and I was like, hey, I think I need to take more. And they were like, okay, but like, do you know what you're getting into? And I'm like, yeah, I think I need to take more. And so I ended up taking like 5 cups. And, you know, I think they started the ceremony around like 9 or 10 o'clock. Most people were done with their journey by like 2. And mine went all the way till like 10 a.m. the next morning, you know?
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and it was one of those things where it's like, I took the medicine, I was laying down, I was trying to just clear my mind. And I was like, this doesn't work. Or, you know, this is evil and God is protecting me. And that's why this isn't working. And so I'm like,
Mhm.
well, just lay down. And then felt, I guess the best way to say it is like, it felt like I was asleep and I woke up and I was completely in a different world. And it was absolutely insane. Like the things that were happening, you know, like I looked out the window, everything I saw was these perfect geometric patterns. And like, you know, there was this massive oak tree outside the window. And I was like looking at it and I could see it breathing and I could see energy coming in and out of the tree. And I remember thinking, I was just like, holy cow, like that tree's alive. And then hearing in my head, it's like, of course I'm alive. Like, what did you think I would be? You know? And it was like, am I talking
Mm.
to a tree right now? You know? And so there was like a lot of, there was just this whole experience of kind of like, this can't be real, because there were things that were happening where I'm like, I know this isn't real, but then I could like replicate the process of what was happening. And I'm like, how is this happening? You know? And so, for
Let
the
me ask
first,
you this.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Did you have like a foot on the ground in the sense that like things would get really strange and you were like, "Oh, okay, it's the medicine. It's
Yeah,
the
yeah. So
medicine."
I definitely like, I had been researching ayahuasca for years. And so I knew of like, I've read about other people's journeys and different things where it's just like, oh, what do you mean, you know, you see things? Or what do you mean, you know, um, you can be in another dimension, or like you see everything is real, but you also realize that like, because that was my whole thing, was like, there was the biggest realization, like just intuitively, that I knew in my soul, looking around like the visible world. I'm like, none of this is real. I'm like, this is all like, it's all pretend. Like none of it's real. And it wasn't that I was looking at it and it was fake. It was that my soul knew that this wasn't the true reality, that there was a higher, you know, different reality that we all come from. And so yeah, like I think I was prepared in the sense that intellectually I understood, but I wasn't prepared in the sense of like, when you experience it, it is, you know, experience is one of the greatest teachers in the world. And um, so it was funny because I went into that experience essentially being like, please, like, cure me of my depression. And there's also like a lot of different things that like I've struggled with in the past that have like hurt my marriage, and different things, you know, where it's like lust and just these different things where I'm like, okay, I want to go in and I want to ask for forgiveness and healing and like these different things. And so that's what my intention was. And I remember feeling this call to like look upwards, like into the sky. And like intuitively, I knew it was like this big, big kind of like moment. And I fought it hard. I'm like, no, 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 I can't. I'm like, I'm not ready. I can't. And it was like, it's like, Taylor, like, you need to look up. And I'm like, no, I'm not ready. I can't do this. I'm like, I shouldn't have come here. I can't do it. And it went back and forth for like, it felt forever. And then basically I felt kind of like what I would say, like this fatherly and motherly hands on my shoulders, where it was like, it's okay, release, look up. And I looked up and saw infinite forms and like manifestations of just, the source. And it was the most incredible. Like I was crying. It was so beautiful. And it was one of those things where I was like, everything that I thought I knew and had been taught about what God was, that it's this man up in the sky, it's like all of that, like it was just these downloads came into my head and my brain. And it was just, it's one of the hardest things to explain to people, because I think like that really opened my eyes to like, we are less than the dust of the earth and we know nothing. And there were a couple of core principles that like were just put into my heart. Number one, it was that every single human being has a piece of like the source within them. And that's kind of like what gives us life. And so it was funny because it's so hard to explain to people, but I was like sobbing. And I remember like, and I do have to say, one of the coolest things about ayahuasca is experiencing like the divine feminine, which has strategically been pulled away from these religious and sacred teachings. But it's like, of course, you can't have creation without the feminine. Like it doesn't, look at who are the creators of the world, like it's not men.
Women are portals. Wombs are
Exactly.
portals.
You literally, men give the life force energy and women take that and create it. And, it was so cool having an experience with the divine mother, like our mother, and like just seeing that and being with her and like just receiving truly like these teachings from sitting at her feet, like humbly just being like, what is all this? And so the core principles were, number one, we all have a piece of divinity within us. That piece of divinity 100% knows truth all the time. And so it was like, you have this bullshit meter that knows truth. And so you don't need to search for truth. You don't need to find people that have it. You just need to make sure you're always aligned with that inside, because it will lead you to truth. And the biggest thing was, it was like, trust your intuition. And I was like, okay, well, how do I turn this company around? Like, how do I save this? How do I do this for friends and family? And it was like the most powerful experience, where it's like, you did not come to earth to build this company. You came to share these different pieces of knowledge, And then again, it was just this wave of like downloads that came in. And it's so funny because I know people think it sounds crazy. And I would never, ever claim to like know everything or be like, I have this, but like, the concepts that were downloaded in, I remember like talking to like friends and family since about these, just these concepts about like duality and, like what enlightenment is and isn't, and they're just like, holy cow. They're like, that sounds very similar to like what, have you read this dude's teachings or this dude's teaching, and it's like, no, it was just downloaded in. And it's made it so simple where it's like, I can read these things and I'm like, oh, I experienced that. I remember
You have
that coming
context.
in. Yeah. And it's like, this isn't my knowledge. I truly don't know anything. What it is all of us have this piece within us. And I think it just showed me to tap into that piece. And so it's, it's funny because people will comment on my videos and they're just like, wow, you break this down so simply. Like, this is the first time it's clicked for me. And it's just like, yeah, that has nothing to do with me. It's like, I didn't work to learn this. It's like, this is just me fulfilling my highest purpose. And one of my purposes is to take these things and put it in a way where it can kind of inch people into their own kind of like awakening of who they are and that power within. And so, yeah, it was just, it was a complete 180 because I was like, the other really cool experience, which it's really tough because I think a lot of people who received the same conditioning that I did would really struggle with this statement. But I remember just like looking up and just begging for forgiveness, um, and just begging to like, have this darkness like taken from me. And it was just like, it was like this female presence that was so sweet and so motherly. And it was just like this, like, asking forgiveness from us is the same thing as asking forgiveness from you. There is no separation. And it was just like,
Mhm.
it was like, like, and the other thing was, it was like the healing is already within you. And part of the journey is tapping into, it's like, you don't need a healer. You need to become the healer. And so
Mhm.
like, that was just the most incredible thing. I called my wife after. She always makes fun of me because I was just like, Bergen, it's like, I get it now. And I'm like, and the only word I can use to describe it is, it is. And she was like, well, what does that mean? And I'm like, I don't know how to explain it. It is. Like, it is, And I think it's like very similar to the concepts where it's like you learn about like, I am. And I'm like, yeah, it is. um, and so it took me a really, really long time after ayahuasca to like integrate and like
Mm.
be like, was that real? Am I just making this up? Was this like my ego and my psyche creating the situation because it knew the stress was so much that it was like, no, your purpose isn't to build this company so that I would have this kind of like, oh, it's not my purpose. So I can like let go and move on to this other thing. And so I really struggled with that, like wondering if it was just, um, because I do think there are some theories out there where people are like, psychedelics are just you creating these experiences and essentially tricking yourself to think that it's experiences with divinity. Um, and I will say there's been so many synchronicities since, like, it's been almost 2 years since I had that journey. And there's been so many synchronicities, confirmations, little signs of like things that I saw on ayahuasca that like happen. And I'm like, I've seen that. Oh my gosh, I know this is true. And
Yeah, I
yeah, it
don't
was really cool.
I don't know how someone that could have that theory if they'd done it because
Totally.
kind of like you, I did a lot of research before doing large doses of psilocybin. So I had enough context, and I'm maybe not as adventurous as you. I'm a little more nervous of a person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when things would get kind of weird, I would be like, "Oh, remember you read that thing? This is not." But there were moments. It took me a little while to surrender deeply, but later on in journeys, especially one experience, there was kind of like what you said. It was like all these sacred geometry symbols, and it
Totally.
was just like there's so much that we don't understand. There's so much science doesn't understand. Like it's so much bigger than what we've been taught to believe. And it was more than just seeing it all. It was like I saw these symbols, and I knew I was hearing things that like that's what this means. And I felt it. Like I haven't questioned it once because I was like, I
Oh
just
yeah.
felt that in my body.
Well, when you experience that much truth, like,
Mm.
and people are like, how can you know? And it's like, oh, like, like, that was like the coolest thing about it. And I've done things where it's like, psilocybin journeys like since. And every single time, the commonality that I always experience is like it hits, and it's just like, oh yeah, none of this is real. And it's like I
Mm.
always forget none of this is real, like, but it is real in the sense of like there are very real things going on. Like there is pain and suffering that is happening. And like I do believe our purpose as humanity, I think the issue with a lot of organized religion is it's very egoic in its structure where you only focus about you and like my salvation, my this. And I do believe there is a personal aspect, but I also believe that this journey that we call life is much more of a group project than a lot of people would like to, admit. And it's like we're in this together, And so when I say none of this is real, I don't want to like demean or even like diminish the very real suffering that goes on in the world. I just mean there are higher, more real levels of consciousness that we have come from, that when you take these things and kind of return to them, there's a familiarity where you're just like, oh yeah, no, I've been here before. This is not like my first time. And like it's so hard to explain because there's things that like even right now talking to you, I'm like, it's so dumb because I can't remember it. But anytime you do a journey, it's like it
You will
comes back and
remember again.
you're like, I forgot this. I totally forgot
Yes.
this. But once you come into your physical body, it's like, oh, I can't retain that knowledge because it's too much.
You remember remembering something. Oh my gosh, that
Totally.
happened to me. Actually, I think that's happened. It didn't start until later journeys, but I would remember someone saying, "You've been here before." And I
Yeah.
would say, "Oh yeah, I have been here before." But
Yeah.
then I can't remember after what I remembered in the
Totally.
moment. I think about that a lot because it's like, what was that? What?
I
And,
know.
and like you said, you get back in and you're like, oh yeah, I remember again. And then
And
when it wears off, it's
and
gone.
I just remember the feeling every single time is
Mm.
like it's almost like this the oh yeah is like it's so simple. How could I forget? And I'm like, but then as soon as you come down, you're like, what was that?
I
What
forgot again.
was it? Yeah. But
Oh, oh man, in my last journey, I was trying to really my intention was to connect with my intuition and like listen to my inner sense of knowing better and follow my path and connect with my intuitive gifts. And then in the journey, I was like, oh, of course, there's no work to do
yeah,
for that. It's just right here. It's all right
a
here. All the
hundred
gifts are
percent.
here. And then it
Okay.
wears off, and I'm like, oh yeah.
I love that you said this because so I'm really big into programming and conditioning because I think the vast majority of our limitations are conditioning that we are born into and told, here's who you are. And I think, one really interesting aspect is a lot of times, oh man, like I have so many videos on this that I haven't done yet because like I have a pattern to it, whatever, but I'll definitely talk about it. Um, I think a lot of times people think of something like enlightenment as something that you ascend to, you work towards, right? You need to do 30 years of meditation in a cave to reach it. And I do want to point out that like I do think plant medicines are an incredible tool to access or even experience higher levels of consciousness. And I think the next step after is to learn to do it for yourself because all of those states of consciousness and like, I've been meditating religiously for 2 years now and have had some of the most incredible experiences. And the difference is when you are meditating, you're kind of like in control. Whereas like when you take it just takes you wherever you're going. And sometimes, there was like one aspect of ayahuasca I remember where I was like, slow down. This is too much because it felt like there was like 5,000 lessons all going in all at once. And I was like, I can't keep track of all this. And I felt like I was going insane, like it was, and the crazy thing is you do keep track of it and it's all in there. But, but I think a lot of times we think of like, you have to work to become this. You need to put in the work to become, enlightened, or you need to put in the work to tap into these energies or these abilities. And work is an illusion because those abilities, that state of enlightenment, it is not something you are ascending to. it is your natural state. Like you
Mhm.
are that. And then
It's
you have
unlearned.
you have the shell that's on top of it that has forgotten it. But like the word that I love anytime I kind of like talk to people about spirituality, or people will hit me up in the DMs and we'll have these really cool kind of like one-on-one experiences about things that they're going through. The word I love is like effortless. And it's like that's what this is. It is effortless because you are it, you know. And um the funny thing is, like, the key to unlocking that is knowing it. If you know that it's effortless, it's like you pull that away, you know. And that's been like the coolest journey for me. Is like, so for example, when I was integrating afterwards, there was so much fear, because I'm like, because I was making content before, like I think you can see it on my TikTok page. Like there's like a big jump from investing content, like here's, you know, some good S&P, you know, like some index funds that you can invest in, or here's how to find like a good investment. And then all of a sudden it's like, what's the meaning of life, guys? You know, like it's like a pretty big like jump. And it's, you know, maybe it wasn't as swift because I tried to like really just like turn the dial
Wade
up a
in
little
there.
bit. Oh, totally. Because I was so afraid, because I was like, what are people going to think? Like, what if I'm just crazy? What if this is religious psychosis? You know, like I studied religious psychosis for months, and the signs, because I'm like, this just might, like, maybe the stress broke me of this, you know, and it's creating this, the right ingredients for me to go into psychosis. And like, maybe that's what it is. And I don't want to put information out there that could hurt other people, because it's like this egoic, you know, like grab for attention for me. And so for months, I dealt with that. And for months, like I would do these meditations where, you know, it's kind of like, okay, I'm afraid of putting the content out there. And it's like, let me sit with that shadow. And it's like, why am I afraid? And it'll be like, okay, I'm afraid because what are people going to think? Could this hurt someone? You know, whatever. And then it's like you address those shadows one by one. And it's like, why do I care what people think? And then, you know, it's like that shadow disappears and you go into the next shadow. And, you know, as I would do this work with myself, every single time I would just get to the spot where it's like, no, like, you know, this is truth. And also, does it matter if you get views? Does it matter if people listen? And it's like, no, like this is my highest purpose. And so like it's where I feel fulfilled, and I'm not doing this for anybody else. I'm doing it for me, you know, and I'm doing it
Mm.
because this is who I am. And you know, it, but like that realization, like that was 2 years of like really kind of like sitting with it. And I think a lot of times people also think like, you know, the word they use in spirituality is like ascending to like higher vibrations. um I think a lot of times people think that ascension is just like you just go up, and it's like, no, it's a lot of bouncing, you know, and it's a lot of like up and down, up and down, up and down, and like you know, kind of like going back to the old you, then to the new you, and then back to the old you. And like there's a lot of like instability, but I believe that instability is actually to show you how shaky your foundation actually is, so that you can destroy it, build a strong foundation, and then it's like have more of a stable course.
And
But
strengthen it too. That
totally.
really resonates with me so much. I mean, I could just tell chatting with you on the phone that you have such a high, you're operating at a high vibration. I mean, even the way that, like in our conversation about when a video gets traction and like the comments from people, you're like, oh, people are, that, isn't it cool that people just see things from a different perspective? And that has been like, I've had to fight off, be like, gosh, people are stupid, you know? And then I'm
Yeah.
like, no, that's not how I want to see the world. That's not like my highest self. And I just, even hearing you say that, I was like, I want to embody that and not need to put other people down to uh, support my own ego, you
Oh,
know? So
totally.
it's that up and down of like, I don't want to say shaming myself, but being like, oh my gosh, why did you think that? That's your ego. Like,
Oh,
why do you need to, what do you have to prove, you know?
so there's such an amazing book by Anthony DeMello that's called Awareness, and it's so beautifully like articulated. So basically, the whole premise of the book is nothing changes until someone becomes self-aware. And it's like, but people don't want to change. And that's why they refuse to kind of like look at themselves. Right.
Mm.
And, it's really funny because I believe he's a Catholic priest, but like most of his teachings are kind of like very, I would say, in aligns with like more of like the mystic kind of like I hate when people call stuff new age because it's like it doesn't
It's not.
exist. There's just truth. And it's like you can put whatever you want, and like we classify things where it's like, oh, this is Christianity, this is Islam, this is Hindu, and it's like none of it exists. Like these are all words that human beings put together to classify these different systems, and it's like, but it's just, yeah, we made it up.
Concept.
um but so DeMello talks about how when you become so self-aware, you recognize all of your weaknesses, you recognize all of your shortcomings. And, kind of the funny statement he makes is like, listen, I'm an ass, you're an ass. And he's like, people are inherently self-serving. And if you truly look at yourself, you will see that in most situations, you are self-serving. You're looking out for yourself. And so it's like, well, if I do that, everybody else does. So why would I get mad at them for doing what I do? Right. And he's like, and when you become self-aware, the most beautiful thing that he said that really struck a chord with me is he's like, people have ruined like the word love and what love truly means. And he's like, when you love someone, you need nothing from them. And he's like, so a lot of these relationships who say, I love you, he's like, it is not love because you need things from them. And so you use them. You put your own needs ahead of theirs. And, the whole book is like when you become so self-aware to the point of like, you are perfectly imperfect, you are whole as you are. It's like all of the needs to like judge others or even need anything, validation from them. And that's what's been like the biggest change for me is like, yes, sometimes like I'll get people in the comments where it's like, sometimes I'll talk about like a science experiment and they're like, you're an idiot, you're interpreting this wrong. And it's like, you know what? I probably am. Like, and it's like, but like the old me would have been like, no, I'm not an idiot. And here's why I need to prove it. But the thing is, like, I don't care whether they think I'm smart or an idiot. What I care about is like putting out a perception that could potentially help someone else. But beyond that, it's like I'm whole the way that I am. I have everything that I need. And so, it's an incredible book that everyone should listen to. But it's really tough because, I told this to my wife and I'm like, the best way for me to love you is to just stop giving a fuck about anything. And I'm like, because then, and it's been amazing because sometimes we'll have these arguments and I'm like, I don't have this need to be right. I just have this need where it's like, oh, here's where I'm at and here's how I saw this. How does this impact you? And it's like, oh, thank you for telling me. Like, I need to, because it's not this personal attack. It's not this like, oh, I'm wrong, because I know I'm wrong. Like, I'm an ass, you're an ass, like, and so it's been so freeing. And I think it allows you, and I've seen it where it's like, once you take that standpoint, it's like, oh, wow, you really can love everyone, or it's like, you look at like Jesus, where it's like, forgive freely, like if someone asks you to go a mile, go two, like forgive your enemies. And I, before it was like, oh, how could you do that? And now it's just like, oh yeah, like it's because you don't need anything from them. And so if someone's like, slapping you, it's like, yeah, turn the other cheek. Cause it's like, cause who cares? Like, it's like, oh, they're
It's
slapping
about
you, like whatever. Like
leave that energy there with them. You don't have to take that on,
totally.
not having anything to prove, not needing to. And I really love what you just said about how taking the concept of, people in the comments and be like, hey, if there's resonance, that's great. If there's not resonance, feel free to, go and find somewhere else that there is resonance. I mean, that's really what, so
Totally.
the beauty of social media and all these different platforms and people discussing different ideas. But like, you don't have to argue with them and win something. Like, it's the ego that wants to win. So
100%.
it's so freeing to be like, and just, I haven't had a lot of videos that had a ton of people arguing with me. But I did have one recently, and I truly believe that's me being tested. Like, okay, let's see,
Yeah.
how you handle this. And it
Yeah.
was just so freeing to be like, oh, that's okay, if it doesn't doesn't resonate with you. So
Oh,
to hear
totally.
you take that concept and apply it to your marriage and say, like, yeah, I mean, we don't have to win. This is two perspectives, and we're just listening to each other. But because we get so caught up in that, I have to win something and prove why I'm right. But if you truly, um, validate or acknowledge yourself, if you validate yourself already, you don't need anyone else to do it.
Yeah. And I think it's this you know, energy vampires are a real thing. Um, I saw like one of the best like explanations where it's like you can get your energy from multiple sources. Like you can get energy from the source, you can get energy from other people. And they're like, the kind of like super spiritual people, really well grounded, are ones that are like strong connection to source, where they're getting the energy they need. And then it's like most people are kind of like some energy from source, some energy from other human beings, where it's like, I need to validate, I need you to validate me, or I need to win this argument, or I need, I need. And it's pulling, from these other people. And then what they said is like narcissism is when you 100% are just taking energy from other people, which I'm like, oh, that totally makes sense to me. Um, but I think it is, when every human being has this kind of fundamental, I have a matter to live, to exist, and it's like my pain matters. And I think a lot of the things that happen in the world is people who don't feel seen. And so they do things to be seen because it validates their existence, whether there's good ways to do it and there's bad ways. And I think there is a place that everybody can get to where they know 100% their existence is validated, that they do have a right to, to be here, that their pain matters. And the funny thing is, the moment that clicks where you're like, my pain matters, the moment you stop caring about it. Like you're just like, oh, it's like, oh, okay, I know that this matters. And it's just like, oh, now I can just let everything go because I don't need you to know that my pain matters. It's like, I already know in the grand scheme of things, it does. And so it's just kind of like, well, why am I holding on to that energy? Like, let's just push it away. Like, who cares? And like, I think, an interesting thing is a lot of people like, it's really tough for like how and I don't get a lot of negative comments. Like, it's kind of crazy how positive people are on these like videos where I'm just like, man, I'm used to the internet being so much more mean. But it's really tough because the thing I don't want to do is I do think people inherently have this view of like elitism where it's like, and so even like sometimes like pushing away a comment nicely can be perceived as it's like, ooh, I'm better than you. Like, I'm not going to do this. And so I always try to be mindful with my words because it's like that person, even like trying to like hurt me or whatever, it's like I'm not on like a higher plane of existence. It's like God, there is no higher. Like we are equal. Like who's to say that that person isn't living their highest potential right then and there? And like maybe what they're doing is meant to teach me. And so it's like, so thank you for doing it because you're doing that role, or that was like one of the craziest experiences that I had on both ayahuasca and mushrooms. I won't mention who, but there's like people in my life where it's just like, why do they do this? And I would have these like, I would see them and they would bow like they were a character in a play. And I'm like, wait a second, they're playing the role that they're supposed to play to teach me. And I'm like, so why am I judging them for playing this role perfectly? Like, it's just like they're exactly where they're supposed to be. And it's like, oh, so why am I harboring, like resentment or like anger? Because it's just like they're just who they're supposed to be and they're teaching me so much. And sometimes it's annoying. Sometimes, but then I also like you start looking at that and you're like, oh, is it annoying because of what they're doing? Or is it annoying because I can't let go of it? And it's like, wait, it's me. It's me that's the problem in this situation because I'm the one that's harboring this, or like, I can't believe they would do that. And so I think a lot of our situations in life where the little kid that's in, 2 feet of water that's screaming like, help me, help me, help me. And then everyone's like, just stand up. And then it's like, oh, like that situation wasn't that bad, but like I made it all. And so,
It's really cool to see like Dolores Cannon, and I've heard different examples of this. I've heard it explained different ways, but one of the most beautiful ones was a woman who was a psychic and saying that, in one of her meditative states, that she was shown in higher realms, her sitting next to her mother who had been very abusive to her, and it was them at the soul level, and her mother saying, this is going to be really tough. Like, this
yeah,
is going to be difficult. And then Dolores Cannon talks about everyone is just playing a character. And it may be that in one lifetime, you're the villain in their
totally.
story to help evolve and teach them something, if you so choose to see it that way. And then in the next lifetime, you switch roles and the other person's
Totally.
the villain. And that's a really hard thing to swallow, especially in a culture, in a society where we want to be valid in our pain, in the sense that we want to demonize other people, and
Totally.
and that really just gives us this validation of how we feel. And it's so freeing to look at it as, what is this teaching me, and why do I have um why am I still tethered to this? Why am I still trapped by it? Other people
Yeah.
are meant to show you where you're still trapped, where you're not free, where you haven't, you know, uh, ascended or went to the next level, or raised your vibration, your frequency, because you're still stuck on something. And when somebody
Totally.
else brings it up to the front, that's an opportunity to be like, man, what is this ping? I always say pinging. Like, if something really triggers me, it's pinging on something
Yeah.
that's back there.
Yeah.
Like, what is this pinging on?
Totally. And I do think like what's really hard again is, you have these conversations with people because there's a lot of people who have experienced incredibly traumatic sexual abuse, physical abuse, psychological like manipulations, like on such a deep level where talking about these things, you don't want to minimize like what they go through, or you don't also want to put it out there where it's just like, yeah, like these girls that are abused by their fathers, and it's just like, no, like fuck that. That is not like, oh, your father is this teacher and he was supposed to do this to you because it's like, you don't deserve that. Like, no girl should ever have to go through something like that. And I do think there are like aspects of like free agency where people violate the sanctity and holiness of like another human being. um, but everybody can get to a point where they can like look at themselves and say, I did not deserve that. Or like, that was a shitty dad who did that to me. And like, no man should ever do that. No girl should ever be in that situation. And it's like, but I'm not going to let this impact me anymore. And it doesn't mean that you have to like, forgiveness does not mean, like, or even like unconditional love does not mean you let go and you're just like, all right, this person's back in my life and I don't judge them for what they did, because it's like, you got to protect your energy. And like, for some people, some of the tests that are here on this earth is, are you strong enough to leave a situation that you need to leave because you know your worth? And like that, so I think a lot of times people think unconditional love, or even like what we're saying, where it's like, these lessons that are incredibly hard, it's like, oh, you're meant to go through it, so it's supposed to happen. And it's like, no, like it's there is a lot of nuance, and like we said, like that pain is real. And it does make me like it makes me really emotional because the society that we live in, I think people are so blissfully asleep and unaware. And it's like, I think the statistic is like 1 in 3 teenage girls contemplates suicide. And it's like, that is messed up. And here we have these men that are like arguing over, here's what a man is, like, here's what a man does. And it's like, they're getting pissed at the blue haired girl that's getting her coffee,
The
or get
archetype.
yeah, or they're getting mad about like all these other things. And I'm like, when literally society, you have companies that from the day these young girls are born are telling them, you're not pretty enough, you're not good enough, you need to buy these products. And it's just like, you think you're a man because you're fighting these pretend wars when literally our daughters are being born into a battlefield, and everyone's just kind of like, oh, this is just the way the world is. And so it's really tough when you talk about karma, because I also think sometimes people are like, wait, was I raped because I had bad karma and I needed to go through this? And it's like, no, like 100% no, that is not the way that this works. Like, there is free agency, um, but there is always healing. But the tough thing is, in that healing, it does require getting to the point where you recognize your own value. And I think that's the hardest thing for these people who go through incredible traumas is their value is pulled from them. And so there's this inherent like, I'm not good enough, or this is why this happened. And the answer in every situation is that's incorrect. Like, you are good enough.
So it's interesting that you say that, because I've talked about that in some other episodes. My stance on that is I was sexually abused by a family member at a very young age, and so was my mother,
Oh,
and it caused a lot of abuse early on in life, from her to me. Um,
totally.
and that was really like the biggest theme in my first significant psilocybin journey, was finding a way to get to the other side of my anger with her, and it really showed me what had happened to her as well.
Yeah,
And I had to come to my own conclusion, because I had a lot of anger for a long time. I had to come to my own conclusion that this was part of my journey and my soul's lessons here. And, everything that's ever happened to me has brought me here. I would never in a million years look at another person and tell them
totally.
that's where they need to be in their journey. Like, they need to
Totally.
adopt that mindset, because I just know, how long it took me to get to the point of acceptance of all that has happened, of all that it is, and looking at, all the pain that I've had as part of the gifts that I have now as someone who is here to heal the world in my own way. But I would never
100%.
look at another person in their own suffering and say, oh, well, don't you know that it was all supposed to happen? Because that's for everybody on their personal journey, I think, to
Yeah.
find.
Have you heard of the archetype, like the wounded shaman? But
You mentioned
it's
it to me, and I really
yeah. Oh,
resonated with
okay.
that. Let's talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Like you saying that, I'm like, oh yeah, I do 100% believe that there are people who come knowing that, I don't think it's knowing that this will happen, but I think that it is a possible outcome, because we live in a world of infinite possibilities, but some are more likely than others. Um, and I do believe like what you're saying, and I don't know where you're at on your healing journey or whatever, but the whole archetype with the shaman is like, through your wounds and through your blood, other people will kind of like begin their path for healing. And I think it's a
Mm,
very noble course of action. And I do believe that there are very powerful, um, mature souls who come knowing that they're going to experience some things because it's going to be critical to their path to help others who are going to go through those same things. And I think that's like the toughest thing for me, that's a little bit overwhelming, is the content that I like put out and the people that I talk to. It's just, the world needs to heal. And like, everybody's pain is so real.
mm.
Um, but the big thing is, because something has happened doesn't mean you have to carry that with you. And, I do think like, and again, it's so hard. It's so
Yeah.
hard to like bring it up, because you didn't choose for that to happen to you. Like this wasn't, like as a child or, whatever, it's like you didn't say, hey, let me opt into this. And so it's really hard to also look at it where it's like, why do I have to be the one to overcome? But I think the biggest thing with kind of like the spiritual path is it has nothing to do with why do I have to, or why, or um, this isn't fair. And it comes down to you are your own jailer and prison, and you can free yourself. And again, forgiveness and unconditional love does not mean being like, hey, it's all good what you did. But it is, it's freeing yourself and
Yes.
like being like, I'm not carrying that with me anymore. And like, there's things in my life where it's like I've seen things that people have done, and it's just like that was a really shitty thing that you did. And it's like that was terrible. And like I've had some like meditations where um I've cried for like the child version of me, where it was like he deserved better. And it's like, but also I owe it to him to not carry it anymore and just be like, okay, like, um, it's, I can recognize that like there are things that I deserved better, or this should have happened. And like, um, for better or for worse, it's like a lesson. It's something that's impacted me, but here I am now. And this is the biggest realization that anybody that can like download this into your subconscious, it is life changing. Um, but the past and the future do not exist in the context that we believe we do. So there's kind of like two ways that you can think about things. You can have a past present mindset, or you can have a present future. And so 99.99% of the world operates in past present, which is your past dictates your present moment. You're like, yesterday, it's like every morning I drink my coffee. Therefore, tomorrow I'm going to drink my coffee. And the next day I'm going to, right? Because it's like, this is who I am. This is what I do. There is a mindset and a state that you can get to where you realize the past doesn't exist. And it's crazy because when you do that, you switch to present future and you have total control over who you are, because it's not even like, oh, just because I did it yesterday, it's like, but I can choose to do something different. It's like, it's not even choosing to do something different. It's like, that doesn't exist. There only is the now. And so it's not choosing different. It's being who you want to be. And there was a day that clicked for me. And there are habits that like in that moment, it was just like, oh, those don't exist anymore, and like, it just like it left and it's gone. And so, I do think there is also, when you talk to people, I don't think it's like as instantaneous. It takes time and it takes work to get to that place. But there is eventually a point that you can get to where even things that have happened in the past, you're just like, it doesn't impact me anymore because I'm a
Yeah.
present future based mindset.
There is a quote in DC in the Holocaust Museum, and it essentially says that it was from someone who had spent time on a concentration camp, and she said the
Yeah.
worst prison is the prison of your own mind. And I truly have reached a point of acceptance of all that has happened. I'm still working on a lot of the
Understandably.
subconscious self beliefs, but
Totally.
the anger, the resentment, the why me, victimhood, I really feel like I have shed those and feel so much stronger and freer as a result. And I think that all that I can do is, I think because of that experience, I can honor other people where they are on their journey, and respect that, like, oh, you're still holding on to a lot of anger and resentment at that person, and that's perfectly valid. Because I remember, had you said to me, at XYZ point in my life 2 years ago, a year ago even, oh, like, you shouldn't be holding on to that because it's only hurting you. Well, who are you to tell me
a
not
hundred
to hold
percent.
on to my suffering?
Yeah.
I had to come to that
Yeah.
place on my own.
Totally. And that's the thing, is everybody is at a different point in their their journey. Um, and I think the tough thing is we live in a world where other people want to tell you how you need to handle it or how you need to
Mhm.
do things. And I think that's where these reactions and the fights kind of come up. And I think that's why this wounded shaman archetype, I just see it everywhere. I think that's why it helps so much, is because, you talking about your story, you're not telling people how to handle their abuse. You are telling, I have been through this. Here's how this has impacted me. And then people through your experience will say, oh, okay, I can see where Taylor's at. I can see the progress she's made. There is hope for me, or maybe, or whatever. And I don't know. It's funny because I think we live in a very so I think part of the purpose of life is this evolution of consciousness. And I think one of the really tough things to experience is a lot of people hold, resentment against, let's say it's your parents or something like that. And I'm because we view things linearly, they're older than you. But I think what makes this life interesting is I actually think there's many parents who consciously are younger than their children, on a kind of a evolutionary scale, and kind of you know,
On a
um,
soul level, I think
soul level,
too.
100%,
I
100%.
think you could have different number of incarnations or soul experiences than, and then it goes back to time as a human constructed
It
concept.
doesn't
It's not,
exist. It,
yeah.
it totally. And I do think there is a sense of conscious maturity and evolution. And so I I think the world that we live in right now, everything is designed for the evolution and growth of consciousness. And what a lot of people don't want to hear is that to push us to evolve, you need friction. You need things have to get to the point. And that's what I keep trying to tell people. It's
That's what duality is.
well, it's things will keep getting
Yeah.
worse until people consciously decide to wake up, because it has to get worse and worse to shake you awake to the point that
Mm.
you're just wait a second, this is BS. And so the cool thing is, it's if everyone just chooses to wake up right now, it's we can build something really, really cool. And I really do have so much optimism, especially with these younger generations that are coming in, and just the vibration that people are bringing in. um, I do fundamentally believe that people can change like that. I believe the politicians that we have right now in the positions that they're in, I believe that they can wake up and change right now and be just because I've done that in the past does not mean I'm going to do this in the future. Um, there is so many resources on this planet. I think about World War II, when it was so chaotic and the world's smartest minds figured out how to split a freaking atom to create a bomb to just stop everyone in their tracks and just be what are we doing? Right. And it's imagine if all of these countries that don't even exist, it's none of it is real. There is no United States, there is no Mexico. It's all man-made constructs, to decide who's in control of what area. But humanity at any point can decide, you know what? Let's switch from the patriarchal competition based mindset and go to more of a matriarchal kind of collaboration based mindset. And what if all of the countries in the world were sending their smartest minds to solve our problems? Because think of all the money we spend on wars, and it's we are so freaking smart that I know if we were in a collaboration based mind, we would figure out free energy. We would figure out how to elevate the lowest people in the world so that starvation doesn't happen anymore. All of these things we can figure out this when we all just stop for a second stop repeating our past mistakes. We're just doing the same thing that has been done over and over. And I just think it just takes a generation to just be like, you know what if we just try something new? Like, what if instead of trying to kill each other, we try to learn from one another, take, I'll learn from you, you learn from me, and let's see what we can create. And I think I do see humanity getting to the point where right now we destroyed life. We have endangered species, and it's like, look at how much we know about these animals and their patterns and what they do. And I think there is a switch that will come where we start creating, and we start, the goal is not how do we preserve these, but how do we create conditions where everything can thrive and we can bring in more, and that's the difference between the scarcity based mindset and abundance. And I just think once we start tapping it into abundance, like, it's going to be incredible what the world creates.
I truly believe that we can raise the vibration of the collective by raising our own personal vibration.
Totally.
So if everyone would just focus on, which is inherently self-serving, when you raise
Yeah.
your own vibration, life suddenly is happy, all kinds of opportunities and new ways of being open up.
You
You
create a
see the
new
world
reality for yourself. You create a new
literally
reality for yourself.
create
Yeah.
a new existence.
Yeah.
And if people could just understand how incredible that is, and so start there with yourself.
Mhm.
And I never used to understand when people would say, well, when you heal yourself, you heal generations after and generations before. I'm like, what does that mean? My kind of like
Yeah. Yeah.
analytical brain. And I truly think that it is about raising the vibration. That energy is going out, and you're raising the vibration of those
Totally.
around you and those connected to you on an energetic level.
Totally. Totally. It is a singular project where you need to go out and create the best possible reality for yourself. And that
Mm.
reality comes through healing and tapping into the creative energy that exists within everyone. And then the group project comes in because naturally, the more you focus on your light and the more you ascend, the greater light you shine, and other people are attracted to it, and other people are pulled up, and it's almost this like magnetism where it again, it's effortless. Like, this is not something like, you do not need to brute force wake people up. It's like, you just need to take your journey, and people will be attracted to that light and that magnetism, and then
Mhm.
it will begin to click for them. And it's one of those things where I always say, right, when the earth is rotating, we experience darkness, and it's not because like the sun is gone. It's just like we're not facing the sun, and so we have this illusion of darkness, but like the sun is always there. And I do believe that is akin to awakening, where it's like the more people that shine their light, it's not that you like banish darkness. It's just like the shadow just leaves. And
Mhm.
so it's just an individual journey, which is so beautiful, because it is, how do you change the world? And it's just like, focus on yourself. And I promise you, it is all gonna work out the way that it's supposed to. And it simplifies things, and I feel like it takes a weight off of people's shoulders, because a lot of times we become overwhelmed with how bad things are. And there's kind
Or
of like the
how bad we're being told, or how we're being asked
totally.
to perceive it or shown it.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I could talk so long about this, because the amount of money that is spent on programming your subconscious, like the amount of money of things that are projected into society, where they're just like, your neighbors hate you, like everybody's a racist, like men are evil, women are this. And it's like music, right? Music is hypnotism. And it's like the messages that are projected to people. And it's like no, it's a really interesting aspect, because I do believe, again, I believe your past is a prison, and if you believe in it, it holds you prisoner. And so you don't need to believe in it. You can create and be whoever you want to be right now. It's effortless. um, I do believe every single one of us has a creative, because we come from the source, the creator. We have creative within us. And so I believe we have 9 billion people on this planet, actively participating in the projection of the visible planet. And so I think that's why so much is spent on accessing the subconscious and giving you these things to project, because you create it. And it's like, we just need to get enough people projecting a world where it's better, and it's like, and it happens. And you just have to believe it. But that's the hardest thing, is people truly don't believe the world can change. And if you don't believe it, it won't happen, because you create that reality.
What is your, so I know you've made some videos on this, but slit theory has essentially is scientific proof that everything is subjective to our own reality, and something doesn't exist if we're not observing it.
Yeah, so there's like a lot of people that get so fired up about like the double slit experiment, because they call the tool the observer, and some people believe it just means like visible sight, and that's
Mhm.
not 100% correct. Like, observance is, in my opinion, if I'm just talking from my perspective, I believe observation is so much more than our five senses. I believe it's almost like a full being kind of like experience that
Like
you
energy
encompass.
interacting with another energy of something
Totally,
else.
like on so many different like levels.
Mm.
um but so one of the interesting things about the double slit experiment, and one of the theories, is called the many world theories. And the whole idea with the many world theories is that a photon exists as a wave, and then when it interacts with like that observation device, it forces it into a singular existence, which, it goes from wave to particle, right? And so the many world theories is that there's infinite possibilities for these waves, and the observance forces it into a singular reality for one reality, but there's infinite parallel universes where the other realities happen. Or like a video I talked about today, is it would be like, if you had this like magical wardrobe where you had 100 shirts, 100 pants, and 100 different shoes. There's like all these different combinations. And in quantum, it would be all of those exist at once. And then you go up to the mirror and you pick what you're going to wear. But then there's infinite realities where all the other outfits get worn, by you, which is
There's
really
a
like mind blowing.
there's a show. It's like a sci-fi cartoon, adult cartoon. It's called Rick and Morty.
Oh, yeah. Rick and Morty's great.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, like that. When I read that, I was like the Rick and Morty episode. Rick
Oh,
and Morty has
Rick
been talking about this stuff for a minute.
Rick and Morty dives into really cool concepts that I think a lot of people, because of like how the show is, I guess, like designed and everything, people won't give it a chance. And it's like, no, there's some really good things in there. Um,
Talking about some deep stuff.
but but I do believe, like, when people talk about so I'll kind of like leave you with this, or like end with this. It's one of the things I wish everybody knew is there's a lot of people on social media that talk about manifesting and different methods to manifest. Manifesting is not a skill that you can learn. You are always manifesting. There is no off button. It's like, it's what you do. There is no like, hey, I want to be a manifester. It's like, you can either consciously manifest or you can subconsciously manifest, and most people are subconsciously. And that's when we talk about all the money that is spent on accessing your subconscious. You are manifesting that into reality. You are manifesting racism, violence, whatever. It's, you
You
believe
can
it,
manifest
you're
negativity
creating
in
it.
yourself.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. People get addicted to anger, and they manifest situations that are going to piss them off because they're addicted to feeling that emotion. And the thing is, that's where it's like, you are the jailer and the prison. Like, you are the creator of your reality. No one else is like creating it except for you. And so
How you
you
see
can
the world,
manifest, right?
what you think it
Totally.
is. Yeah.
And so that's the most important thing, is people need to realize this is not oh, I want to learn the skill of manifesting, because there should be urgency with this, because it's like, you are manifesting. Like, you are doing it right now. You will never stop. And that's why it's worthwhile to learn these things, because you can switch from an unconscious creator to a conscious one. Um,
Absolutely.
and we are not in a competition of resources. It is not your manifestation versus mine. We manifest our highest timeline, our highest, self, um, most fulfillment. And that's why I also think it's kind of a waste of time sometimes when people manifest like, it's like, oh, I want to become a billionaire. And it's just like, you're still missing the point. It's like, fuck money. Who cares? Like, it's such an old way of thinking. Like, it's like, guys, we need to manifest something and create something better, abundance. Like, there's so much here for everyone.
A
And
world that doesn't live in a scarcity, a state
yeah,
of scarcity mindset.
there's,
Create a world
there's
where
no reason for it. There's,
there
it,
is
it,
no
make,
competition. There is
it makes
no
no it makes no
scarcity.
sense. Like, there's ways that you can look at money and you're like, the system is so archaic. Like, the fact that scientific research is inhibited by funding because it's like, oh, we can't find a cure for cancer because we need this amount of money for cancer research. And it's just like, now imagine a world that we lived in where it's just like there's no constraints on money because we have so many resources. And so we just put resources where we need them to solve problems. Like, that is totally possible. And so everyone just needs to manifest. I think the best book that I've ever read about controlling your mind is actually a tiny little pamphlet. It's called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. It is incredible. It is so good. You can read it in an hour. And it just has like these one-liner zingers that are incredible, talking about how your mind is a garden. And it's like, it is going to grow something, whether it's flowers, whether it's weeds. It's like the garden is always going to grow. Now, cultivating the garden comes down to, each individual person. And that's what manifestation is cultivating your garden. Like, choosing. The other thing that I wanted to kind of like end with, once you realize that you're manifesting, is that some people would call it like we live in an informational matrix, or people would say there's infinite realities, like you were saying with like the double slit experiment. These waves of light exist as waves, infinite possibilities. You have your physical body, which is a singular state. You have your light body. And this is when people can experience higher forms of consciousness, whether it's meditation, whether it's plant medicines, breath work. There's so many different techniques, tapping into the creative flow when you're doing art, gardening, like so many. If there are infinite possibilities for you as a human being, infinite parallels of decisions you've made, talents that you've had, all of these different things, you just need to get to the state where you exist in all those infinite possibilities and then pull it down into your singular state. And that's where people talk about like timeline shifting, or channeling your higher self, where it's like there's a version of you that is an incredible painter. So if you want to learn how to paint, it's like, yeah, you can go from A to B to C learning how to paint. And it's like, or you can encompass that energy and kind of like bypass the learning process and become the version of you that knows those things and like tap into it. And I've done that in some small ways in my life that have been incredible. And I'm learning to like get better at it. But I just
Ooh,
think
let
all
me
these
ask you
things.
about that
Yeah.
really quick then, because I understand that you're tuning into the frequency. So think of it
Mm-hmm.
like a radio station.
Mm-hmm.
You're tuning in to the frequency of the you that is capable or has accomplished XYZ. When you say that, but I've never necessarily thought about it as like a completely new skill that you don't necessarily have to learn. So can you give an example of a way that you've done that?
Yeah. So there's actually some really cool like scientific examples of this where oh man, is it Espinoza? Like uh I should know what the dude's name is. He's written so many books where like it's like becoming supernatural, and they talk about like these studies
Oh,
from like John
Dispenza.
Dispenza. Yeah. And so, they have the studies where it's like they have a control group that learns how to play the piano. They have a control group that has no lessons. or so the control group is no lessons. They have a group that's learning, and then they have a group that just imagines it in their head, and they create that reality. And what they
Or the-
find is that group learns how to play the piano really, really quickly. And then they did the same thing with weightlifting, where they had a group where it's like they would go lift weights. They had a group where they put them in casts so that they couldn't, they did nothing. And or the group that was in cast, I believe, would create the reality that they were working out, but they wouldn't do anything. And then they had a control group, and the group that was in cast still had muscle growth because they were creating that reality. And so I think people like, again, when you think about it logically, you're like action, reaction. You have to do something to become something. Um, but I think when you can step away from that and realize none of this is real, there is nothing to become. You are it. Then it ultimately comes down to you creating that reality in your head, that timeline, whatever you want to call it. And again, it's effortless. And so it's not that you create it and you project it, but it's rather this magnetism where you pull it to you and it becomes you. And that doesn't mean you don't do actions. That doesn't mean like, you're just going to sit there and be like, I want to become a world renowned painter, and you never touch a paintbrush. But it's when you have the knowledge that you have done it, when you're actively taking time to like curate it, and then you sit down and you do it, it is going to happen exponentially faster. And so for me, where I've seen this has definitely been in like content creation. Like, I think people like look at my page and, maybe some like assumptions are made because people just don't know. But like my Instagram page, I'm like, it was at like 5,000 followers, like 5 or 6 weeks ago. And I think like right now it's at like 140, but like the whole thing was, I was like, oh, I can spend all this time studying other people's content and how they do things. And I'm like, but I spend time in my manifestations every morning creating where it's like, oh, here's content I'm going to make, and here's how it's going to pull people in, and here's how it's going to grasp. And it's crazy. It's crazy because like seeing the success that it has, right? And other people will be like, oh, it's just the algorithm is starting to figure him out, or people are starting to be pulled to it. And you can believe whatever you want to believe. But like that was like a huge piece. Like I would say, like for you, creating the success of the podcast and seeing what it's going to be like as people are like following, and the conversations you have and the people that it's like, create that because it's going to happen. And if you know it's going to happen, because you cannot, the subconscious mind, right? The hardest thing about it is you're like, oh, I think it's going to happen. I want it to happen. And it's like, the difference is when you turn on, I know it's going to happen. That's when you truly start impacting reality. And I can go on a huge tangent with this, because when you look at like cases of healing and different things, it is people who know something is going to happen. Or you can look at, for the Christians, you look at Jesus, and he would always ask people, do you have faith that this can happen? Right. And he was this tool and this mechanism where they knew, because they believed in him, that like he can do this. And it's like you just have to unlock that piece within you of understanding where it's like, I am limitless. I can do these things. And it's like, that's where you get the crazy cases of people that heal themselves or do these different things, and like, and so content was a huge one. Helping myself with these like little like micro addictions that I had, and just kind of like realizing where it's like, oh, the past doesn't exist. And then I was just like, that's not a part of me anymore. Like, and it's not even that that's not a part of me anymore. It's that like, it's never been a part of me. And I just don't want to like live in that delusion anymore, because I'm whole, I'm complete. And like, it's just like that. It's like a light switch and it goes away. And so, yeah, it's cool, but it's one of those things you can tell everyone in the world about this, but until they do it for themselves or start testing it out, and it's really hard, because I know you can leave right now and be like, okay, that was a cool podcast. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to meditate, and then it's going to be like, here's what's going to happen. But then there's always the little piece of you that's like, well, what if it doesn't? Or what if I 100% believe something is going to happen and then it doesn't? What does that say about me? Or what does that say about these concepts, right? There's always these like little, almost like excuses that you can give yourself to not believe 100%. And so I think that's the toughest thing about this is like
How do
being
you
able to
escape
give
that
yourself up
though?
100%.
You just decide that you're going to, you just set an intention to?
Yeah, for me, it was like, so there's a meditation method called Wu Wei Golden Thread. And it's like, so it would be sitting down and you're like, okay, I have this excuse or this fear. And then it's like, why? Where does this fear come from? And you just keep pulling that thread and asking why. And eventually you get to a point where there is like the fear is gone, the shadow's gone. And then you're just kind of like, well, I know. And it's a big change. But like it's yeah, it's really tough because I'm, like I don't want to like say this where it's like these are things that I have seen, and like I said, I've seen it in like small ways. But I'm not going around to like hospitals healing people, like I would love to.
Which
I
is what
wish I
Joe
had
Dispenza
that.
is
Yeah,
collecting
totally.
data on.
Totally. And so, it is one of those things where it's like, I know that possibility is real, but I need to still work on myself as like a conscious creator. But the thing is, you don't have to be at the pinnacle to share these things with other people. And so, it's kind of, again, it's that wounded shaman where it's like, okay, as I'm on my journey, it's like, let me share these things in bite-sized pieces of content so that other people can take this journey with me. And so, and it's never about nothing I say or like put out there. There's no such thing as like teaching, because it's all just remembering. Like we all have this in us. There are no, so that's why every single person you approach, it's like they can be your teacher because they have something, but it's not something new for you to learn. It's something for you to remember that's already in there that you're hiding.
Everybody is their own unique medicine that the world needs.
Totally. Yeah, everyone
That's a
everyone has a
beautiful way to
part.
think about that concept too. Is there
Yeah.
somebody that needs us to remind them of something?
Yeah, there was like I think it's Buddha that says when you realize every single thing is your teacher, it's like the learning really begins, or something
Mhm.
along those lines. And it's, I think the society that we live in right now is people are so insecure about their knowledge that it's attacks, and it's like, I need to fight to show that I know. And it's like, when in reality, it's pretty freeing and comfortable to get to the point where it's like, I don't know, so teach me. Like I would love to hear, um,
Mm.
there's a Jane proverb that I keep saying, I'm like, this is the last thing. And then it's like, so there's a really cool Jane proverb, and it's about like, five blind men go up to like an elephant. One grabs the leg, one grabs the tail, one grabs the trunk, one grabs the body. And they're asked, what is an elephant? And one's like, it's like a snake. And the other's like, no, it's like a column. And the other's like, no, it's like a wall. Um, and they all have these different, like perceptions of what it is. And the thing about the proverb is, we are all these blind men, and we hold on to our convictions and our perceptions. But the thing is, if we would just learn from other people's perceptions, the full picture comes in. Yeah, totally. And
Mm.
so that's kind of been the biggest like flip. And it's the same thing where it's like, if I post something and someone calls me out in the comments, like there is this genuine, like, it's like, oh, they might see something that I can't see. This is an opportunity for me to like learn from them. And then there's just some people that are like, that just want to be dicks or just want to be mean. And I think like, my perception with that is like, if someone is not trying to offend you and you get offended, you're an idiot. If someone is trying to offend you and you choose to be offended, you're a bigger idiot. Because why would you let them have that, And so it's like, in all situations, there's never a reason to be offended, because either it's not intended, and if it is, it's like, why give them that? They're just trying to get your energy, and it's like, it's not going to work with me. And
That's
so,
theirs that's their
yeah,
negativity to carry.
yeah, it's just like, you're whole, you're complete. You need nothing from no one. And so it's when you're at that state, it's like you can freely give because you don't need anything. And the cool thing about that is we all naturally exist at that state. It does not need money. It does not take work. It does not, you don't need to have this and that to be happy. It's like you can be it right now and you can free yourself from all of that,
Mhm.
you know? And so,
It's beautiful.
yeah.
Gosh, Taylor, thank you so much. This was a wonderful episode. I personally learned
Yeah, I had
a
so
lot
much
from
fun.
it. It's really great to just hear your perspective is so refreshing. So thank you so much for your
Yeah,
time.
you're being overly generous, but I really appreciate you having me on. And always, it's fun to talk to other Taylors out there. You know, it's, yeah.
All right. All right, everybody. Until next time.